On this episode of the Captain's Lifestyle Podcast, I sit down with Robby Besner. I met Robby at the Biohacking Congress in Austin, Texas, and after hearing his talk on Primal Healing, I knew I had to have him on the show for you guys. So many people think that being healthy has to be expensive, and that's absolutely not the case, especially if you're just getting started in holistic health. Nature has provided us with so many free methods that we can use to naturally heal ourselves, which we're going to talk about in today's episode. So a little background on Robby. Robby is the Chief Science Officer and co-founder of Therasage, a leader in infrared technology and holistic healing modalities. He graduated from Boston University in pre-med, engineering, psychology, and business, and then continued on to postgraduate work at Case Western Medical School and holistic medicine. Robby is a wealth of knowledge, and I'm stoked that I got to have him on the show. We're actually going to be doing a part 2, so stay tuned for that. Now, before we dive into today's interview, I'd like to give you a word from our sponsors. First up, this episode is brought to you by Therasage, and you guys can get an exclusive 20% off site-wide on anything if you click the link in the description and use the code TheCaptainsLifestyle, all one word. In fact, just before recording this intro, I used that code to buy my parents a water filter because I got home and I realized that my parents are still drinking tap water, which is horrible. It's filled with contaminants. So I bought the Thera H2O filter for my parents. So you guys can get the hookup, 20% off anything on Therasage.com. Use the code TheCaptainsLifestyle. Next up, this episode is brought to you by Bioptimizers. Specifically, I'd like to highlight their product Magnesium Breakthrough because one of the things that we mentioned in this episode are the Therasage infrared saunas. And you want to be especially cognizant if you're doing any type of sauna or heat therapy or intense exercise that you're replenishing your minerals, especially magnesium, because already up to 80% of Americans are deficient in magnesium, which can lead to a whole host of issues. Magnesium plays a role in over 300 different enzymatic functions in the body, most notably deep sleep, stress and anxiety management. It can help muscle cramps. It can help relieve headaches, a whole host of things. So if you're deficient in magnesium, that's not good. So magnesium is the number one supplement that I recommend. Typically, I don't recommend supplements first up because as you hear in this podcast, you can utilize the free methods like sunlight, grounding, water, things like that. But magnesium is one of those supplements because our soil has been so depleted of nutrients. It's one of the ones that I recommend up front because it has such dramatic effect on reducing stress and improving deep sleep, muscle recovery, all of that. You guys can get the hookup on magnesium if you head to magbreakthrough.com/Taylor. Next up, this episode is brought to you by HVMN and their Ketone IQ shots. These are fantastic for travel, for putting them in your gym bag. I keep them in my car. I keep them fucking everywhere, honestly. They're fantastic for a quick hit of mental focus, physical endurance, clarity, and I was chugging them at the Biohacking Congress because when we got a break for lunch, I didn't want to utilize that break. So I stopped my hunger cravings, took a shot of Ketone IQ instead so I could learn and connect with the amazing speakers like Robby at the Biohacking Congress. So if you guys want this level of mental clarity, focus, physical performance, and reduction in hunger cravings, then you can use code CaptainMorgan_20. Click the link in the description. Last but not least, this episode is brought to you by Lambs, my favorite EMF blocking clothing. I'm actually wearing their underwear right now. You can't see it, but I am wearing them because I want to protect my balls from EMF exposure, which is one of the things that we talk about in this episode, the harmful electromagnetic fields. They can cause a whole host of things. Related to the balls specifically, they can reduce sperm count, sperm quality. They can even lead to infertility and potentially erectile dysfunction, a reduction in testosterone. EMFs have been shown to reduce melatonin, which is your sleep hormone and a powerful antioxidant. So if you're deficient in that, your sleep is going to suck. If your sleep sucks, everything else in your life sucks. So I wear Lambs underwear, their shirt, their beanie, especially when I travel because airports are laden with EMFs. So every time I fly, I deck myself out head to toe in Lambs gear. You guys can get the hookup on anything from Lambs if you use code Captain Morgan at getlambs.com. All right, now let's get into today's interview with Robby Besner. Robby, welcome to the Captain's Lifestyle Podcast.
I'm so humbly really happy to have you had me on.
Yeah, after your talk, I believe you were the second presenter here at the Biohacking Congress, and that was awesome. You basically covered all 8 spokes. Speaking of, I've got a sticker in my pocket. Here, you can have that.
Love that.
That's my logo. So each of the spokes of the wheel represents a different pillar of lifestyle optimization. You covered basically all of them in your talk. And then earlier today, we were discussing how most people are trying to put profit over people, right? We're both fans of the phrase people over profit. So for this episode, let's focus on a lot of the free ways that nature has provided for us to optimize our health and happiness. So cool. Where do you want to start?
Well, how about the title of my presentation, which is basically Primal Healing? And that's really what you just addressed, because basically primal healing is getting us back oriented into touching earth and really communing with nature. And as much as I appreciate the advancements in technology, Bluetooth this and wireless that and electric everything now, cars and bikes, and you know it, I think in many ways we enjoy those niceties, but we also have departed greatly from the way nature intended us to be. Yeah. And so as a company and the device developer and co-founder of our company, Therasage, I study nature and I study the relationship between animals, plants, and our environment. And I also study ancient cultures, the history of the world, what medicinal, religious, any health-related activities that are embedded in certain cultures, as the history of the world has evolved. What were those attributes? Why do they incorporate water in prayer and in baptism and why do some cultures have sweat lodges and some areas of the country like the Ukraine and the Baltic states? Why do they have community saunas and sweat houses? Why is that? Is it all about just being together and talking about good times and all that? Or is there really health attributes that are sort of woven into it? And what people see on the outside is just what we've always known in a sense of community, not understanding that there were health attributes that were kind of woven into the thought process and why it was there from their ancestors. And it was just passed on and passed on. And so primal healing, I think, is really important because we're integrated functional healthcare providers. Our company is 20 plus years old, 23 years old. It was born on the back of me taking leave from my business activities to manage my daughter's healthcare. She contracted Lyme disease in her early teens. And as a chronic, this is 25 years ago plus. So then the research on Lyme was much less. Yeah. And the amount of Lyme literate doctors, the people that really were in the know, was much less, that community. And the methods they were doing back then are very different than what we know now as we evolve forward. So I had all those handicaps then. We didn't have telemedicine. We had a doctor in New York that was the lead doctor, and then corresponding doctors then in Florida where we lived. And by, let's say, the third month or so, my daughter had an entourage of doctors, and a pain doctor, a neurologist, a Lyme specialist, a general practitioner. I mean, it just went on and on and on. The point being about all of that is that with all of that science and with all that medicine, the approaches were fairly antiquated in terms of Lyme research and Lyme applications. What I quickly became aware of or started to focus on is the dynamic between the relationship of the doctor and the patient or the client, right? And maybe if you find a good practitioner that you resonate with, maybe that's less than 1% of the time in your healthcare journey. The rest is, the onus is on the individual that's sick and the family that's directly surrounding them, that support system, and then their community around that, right? That dynamic. And so when I looked at that and unpacked it, I realized that it really was up to me as a bioresearcher to actually help find some methods that would actually help my daughter help herself. And selfishly, I organized, it took me quite a couple of weeks, I don't know, maybe half a year, almost 6 months, to organize a 3-month trip to China. This was 25 years ago. And I interviewed 65 factories to start to develop some devices that I thought would be, and test that I thought would be really great for my daughter to help her manage the things that she was, her symptoms that she was expressing, which was cognitive challenges, She experienced body pain, and she experienced what I thought was high levels of toxicity and inflammation. Can anybody out there listening today relate to any of that? I think that's the world that we live in, correct?
Just
right?
a bit.
Yeah. And so back to primal healing. The allopathic general accepted practices in medicine, particularly in the US, Western approach, most of us would agree coming out of the other end of the tunnel with COVID, there's some broken parts in that model. It's given us all an opportunity. I'm trying to be nice here.
Yeah.
Okay. We don't know who's listening today. So there are some parts of this discussion that we can actually take more personal interest in managing our own healthcare. And that dynamic, the connection between the practitioner and your own personal entourage to help support that system. So I started creating devices for her. They started to work, and the doctors basically said, hey, can you start making for us? And we didn't have venture capital. We didn't have a business plan. What we had was pain to passion. We had organic growth.
What were the devices?
Well, the first was that I started to look at the way she was expressing herself, and somehow I centered on toxicity. And so I did deep research into toxicity and the best methods to detox. And there are invasive and non-invasive ways to do it, like chelators that are chemically driven, or invasive ways like dialysis, stuff like that. And then in that process, I discovered that the sun, there are frequencies in sun energy, the infrared spectrum particularly, that will mobilize all the toxins in your body. You don't need chemicals. You don't need to take an IV and puncture your skin. You just have to hang in the sunlight. Oh my God, primal healing.
Mm-hmm.
So for people tuning in today, this journey, like, your body is complex. We all know that. And if you've got chronic ailment, that could have complexities too. But the road to recovery really starts at creating a primal base. Understand appreciate good air, good water, good sunlight, good food sources to start with. And then, of course, the third is something a little bit more involved. It's sort of freeing yourself up from the man-made or exogenous frequencies like 3G, 5G. If you think, by the way, that the cell towers carry just 5G networks, you're totally wrong, because the government and the military have 7G and 10G wavelengths that are being broadcasted from the same cell towers. And so we are surrounded with frequencies that basically we can't hear, smell, taste. Our senses actually can't respond to them. But there are things that do respond, like our body. Mm-hmm. So we get beaten up enough with these EMFs and these other kinds of fields, get beaten up enough, then it affects our immune system, which allows some of the pathogens and, aggressive kinds of diseases to cause havoc on the body, really disrupt both neuroplasticity, our brain's ability to perceive things, so it can't respond properly and send the proper amount of mechanisms that are built into our bodies to protect ourselves. So not to mention all the chemicals and things in the environment.
So let's talk detox. The best way to detox is a juice cleanse, correct?
It's one of the really great ways.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
I was not aware of that.
Gerson,
they can actually work.
What?
Juice cleanses.
Oh my goodness. Max Gerson, he's passed away. He's an amazing story. And I read all of his books because he came out of a part of Central Europe that Einstein and Albert Schweitzer, he came out of that core group of scientists that came over to the US. And he had a challenge. He had actually migraine headaches, and he wanted to figure out a way to fix that. And so he came up with a juicing cleanse. It's not easy to do his process, by the way. But in the process of fixing himself and his migraines, he started to do case studies and realized he was fixing basically every chronic ailment: cancer, diabetes, high blood pressure, heart disease, everything that is in the top 10 list of chronic ailments, he was able to fix through his juicing process. Now we get into the money discussion and the conspiracy theories, which I really don't want to go there too deeply, but I'll say that and he brought more than 20,000 case studies to the FDA and to the AMA to show and prove that, in fact, his juicing methods will fix many of these problems. And I hardly use the cure word, frankly, Taylor, but in this case, I will. That's how powerful this was. So, of course, the first order of business was for everyone to say that this guy's a quack. And the second order of business was, and they did this, they banned Gerson's protocols from every clinical application in the country. And they actually went as far as to say, if you did use any of his protocols, they would strip you of all of your credentials, everything you worked for. So then it went further, because that's not good enough. What they did was they hired someone, embedded him in his practice, and they poisoned him with arsenic, which he was basically on his deathbed. And he used his own juicing methods to revive himself, and he lived through that process. If you can imagine that, they burned his lab and burned up all of his research so that it couldn't get out. Fortunately, his daughter, which was sort of his protege in the process, rescued him and able to revive him with his own juicing. They fixed him. They reoriented all of his research. And then they set up some institutes, some in the US and some outside, so that there was some insulation there. And so they were back in operation. Then they came and poisoned him again. That time he didn't make it through it. So, but that's a common story here. It seems like all the new age work that really works is somehow disregarded, or the people behind it somehow don't survive the experience to bring it out to the public. But, then you have you and I that have the opportunity to bring to the audience new wave stuff and actually revive some of these stories like I'm talking about today that might be important information for people to know, to try to help them help themselves.
So high level overview, what was his juicing protocol? Because from my understanding, what most people think of juicing is they just get to drink some sugar-filled juice and that they're going to be better.
Right. No, it's nothing like that. He had actually pretty extensive, it's mostly fruits and vegetables, green apples, and organic everything. But why it's a little bit of a process is because you're basically juicing most of your day. But of course, if you have stage 4 cancer and you're looking for natural ways to try to help yourself, you don't mind spending that time, because the alternative maybe not really be an alternative. Meaning some of the readily practices, oncological accepted practices here in the U.S. In fact, they polled 100 oncologists, and they said to them, if you got cancer, or anyone in your family got cancer, would you actually use the same protocols that you are now, because you took a hypocritical oath to the AMA, would you actually employ them on yourself or your family? And 100 out of 100 doctors said no, they would not do that. So they're dictated or mandated to use this in their practice, but yet they won't use it on themselves and family. And why that is because mostly in the process, yes, they'll extend your life maybe a couple of years in the Western allopathic approach. Well, you got 2 more years. You're going to die anyway, right? Well, get with it. We're all going to die eventually. But let's talk about quality of life.
Yeah.
You extend another couple, 3 years, but what's your quality of life? And so that's the point. And more importantly, we're discovering that's causing a, kind of a more microscopic look at alternatives like the Gerson methods, which I sort of practice on a minute level. I'm a pretty healthy guy, and for the most part, I'm using it prophylactically and part of my dietary regime. But I would suggest everybody that's listening today, if you have chronic ailments, to read Max Gerson's books and look into his institute. There's one in California, there's one in Hawaii, and I believe that they've got some clinics in just over the border in the Baja Peninsula in Mexico. Speaking
of chronic illness and health span, that 60-minute piece that just came out of chronic or obesity being purely genetic. What are your thoughts on that?
I don't have a lot of thoughts on that, frankly. I think obesity, there might be some genetic proclivities that we all have, but I'd rather focus back on primal healing and the understanding that when we depart from the way nature intended us to be, then we upset that mechanism.
Yeah.
And mostly what we're talking about now is epigenetics, the effect of the the choices that we're making and the environment that we're living in and how that affects our genetics. And so right now we're experiencing in our clinics, we're experiencing women that are around 15 years old that are showing signs of infertility and guys under 20 that have low testosterone levels.
Yeah.
That's not genetics. That's the environment.
Yeah.
So what do I think about it? I think, yeah, people have eating disorders. Maybe it's from stress, maybe a little bit is genetics, but I think the mechanism that happens in the body that fuels our body, like I intermittent fast. And so I'm constantly going through a process of really not storing fat.
Mm-hmm.
But the American diet and what we've been sold on TV and what is being pushed in our food chains and the fast food markets. Yeah. Well, yeah, it's inexpensive. You get it fast. You heat it up. I'm not offending anybody. And I don't come from a place of judgment today. I'm just reporting this stuff to you.
Right.
We have a microwave oven in our house. I've never used it. I'm not against microwaves. In fact, in college, I used to stand like 2 inches away and watch my popcorn pop,
Yeah.
And then I discovered that I was basically radiating my brain because there's no filter on that oven.
Yeah.
And the microwaves are 60,000 times stronger than the microwaves that come from the sun energy, which won't hurt us or won't affect us the same way.
Mm.
Yes, they heat our food up, but they destroy all of the organics and the enzymes, the living source of the food. So it's hot and it's abundant because Americans like to eat a lot of food, right? And it fills your tummy up. But let's talk about nutritional value. Probably zero. So Primal Healing, good foods, try to get things that are low order, close to, the food chain. So you've got all your plants and vegetables, and then you have the animal kingdom that eats the plants and vegetables. And then if you're a animal or a protein consumer, then you eat the vegetables, and that's sort of how. And by the way, the sun, when it beats down, there's a mechanism called singlet oxygen energy. And it's a very unstable molecule. But in the plant kingdom, in the very early part of the morning, when the dewdrop falls onto the leaf, that dewdrop is actually a singlet molecule of water. And then when it drops on the leaf and the sun rises, that sunlight, that early morning sunlight, restructures that water in that droplet. And then it's combined with the oxygen that's around. That's why rainforests and rainforest air is so regenerative, because it creates that singlet oxygen energy. The plant sucks that water droplet in that's been energized by sunlight, and it stimulates, or it's the precursor to photosynthesis. So it's the way that the plant kingdom digests sunlight to make plant energy. Then the animal eats the plant. So now the animal is getting sun energy vicariously through the process that the plant did. And then if we don't get direct sunlight or indirect sunlight to get that energy, then we eat the animal or the plant. And so we're all interpreting sunlight or light energy. So when we break it all down, you and we have something in common. We're both light beings.
Yeah. I have sometimes like mini panic attacks when I think of how most people are just bombarded with toxins, and like most things that the average American is doing is like we were saying, disconnected from nature, like from how we were supposed to live. Like the clothes that we're wearing and even me, like this is definitely made of like polyester and plastic. So I'm part of this too, to like the personal care products and the endocrine disruptors and so many things. So what are some of the most important things from a health standpoint that we can do to get back to nature? We've already touched on some of them, the sunlight, the eating, which we can go more in depth into both of those. But in addition to those, what else can?
Well, I think we can start with creating a safe place. We're in the middle of winter. If we were in the middle of some part of our country where black bears or the bear population lives, what do they do in the winter? They hibernate. Mm-hmm. So where do they hibernate? In their cave. That's their safe place. What are our caves? Our apartments, our houses, right?
Yep.
Our tents. our RVs. These are our safe places. So let's start there. Let's create a true safe place where the water's filtered, the air's filtered, the sunlight we have to somewhat import, or we can, some of the devices that I make harness sunlight. So that's a way to bring it in. And the food sources, if we make better choices and go organic. If we have two choices, yes, it might be a little bit more money, but you're getting, like, what's the compromise?
Yes.
You spend a little more money, and so you don't spend a whole lot of money when you get sick. So I'd rather practice what they do outside the US, which is incremental healthcare. That means focus on movement, focus on good resources around you. That will just support vitality and health. In China, they change their diet every quarter as the seasons come in, and their foods are tonics. So during the winter, they're already changing their foods so that they're actually creating liver tonics and gallbladder tonics, so that when we come out of winter, your organs and your body will be attuned and ready for life and vitality. Again, and by the way, bears aren't the only ones that hibernate. We hibernate also. If you live in a colder environment, your metabolism is slowing down. You're wearing a lot of layers of clothes. So we're Michelin men and women. We are storing fat because the primal healing, the primal part of our body, fat basically stores our energy. It's actually our energy bank. And as a keto and a modified keto, and I practice intermittent fasting, I'm basically eating food that's being digested and being processed and being used for energy right at the spot. I'm not storing. I'm fat burning. I'm not fat storing. But during the wintertime, we change our foods. We add foods that maybe have more carbohydrates in it. We're actually starting to accumulate fat. Why is that? Because we're going into hibernation. Our metabolism slowed down a little bit. And when we're not moving around so much, what's our source of energy? It's going to be from the stored fat in our bodies. So this is all natural stuff, and we can actually use these different cycles, and we can use these different biomechanics in our favor to allow our bodies to heal themselves. And really, that's where I focus most of my time and research.
Awesome. So let's talk about that. Creating a safe space in your home, I agree, is one of the most beneficial things you can do. Control what you can control, right? We can't control our external environment, right? But we can control the place that we spend a large portion of our time. Right. So what are some of the best things that we can do to create that safe space?
So let's just start with the bedroom. We want the bedroom to be kind of pitch black, actually no light at all. And I'm even talking about that little red light that's on your TV set on the other side of the room is generating a wavelength. And we have a little organ that's in the middle of our brain about the size of a walnut. That's called the pineal gland. It's tied to the optic nerve. And so when you're sleeping at night, or you're in a dark room or a slightly partially lit room, even though your eyes are closed, that optic nerve is still picking up light in the room, even low light. And then it's communicating that to this pineal gland. And the pineal gland's main function is to produce hormones called serotonin and melatonin. So melatonin is your anti-anxiety and your sleep slumber type of hormone. So when the room is dark, then melatonin is being produced. As soon as the sun rises, your eyes sense, before you even wake up, your eyes sense that light source. It starts to give that signal to your brain and the pineal gland. It turns off the melatonin production and starts producing serotonin, which is your energetic hormone that wakes us up. And that's why you wake up fresh and revived and all that. Yep. And so make your room pitch black. Then do an inventory of exogenous frequencies, devices that generate EMF or ELF. That's extreme low frequencies, which is dirty electricity, or EMF, electromagnetic fields. And so mostly anything that's plugged into a wall is going to do that. And for $50, you can buy a Gauss meter, which measures, it's like a little Geiger counter that measures EMF.
This is our captain speaking. I'm interrupting this interview to show you exactly what Robby's talking about. Here I've got the Acousticom 2. This is about $200 on Amazon, recommended to me by Matt Maruka. He's the founder of Raw Optics. And as I turn it on, you can see and hear just how high the EMF levels are. As I get it close to my computer, it's reading all the way up to the top. So that just shows you how much EMF exposure you're being exposed to when you're around your electronic devices. So if you want to avoid things like brain fog, headaches, fatigue, irritability, trouble sleeping, then I highly encourage you to pick up one of these bad boys. This is the LifeTune Zone. This provides up to 93 feet of protection. And the reason why the EMF meter was still all the way up at the top was that this doesn't actually block the EMFs. What this does is it draws in the chaotic energy and modulates it so it's less harmful to the body. It harmonizes it. Super cool. So every time I travel, I bring one of these with me. I've got one of their stickers on the back of my phone. I've got one on my computer, and this one stays in my room. So again, 93 feet of protection. My whole room and beyond is protected from EMFs. You guys can get the hookup on anything from Aries if you use code Captain Morgan and click the link in the show notes.
And you can go around your house and you can impress all of your friends and go around their houses,
Yep.
And show them the hot spots where, in fact, there's these bleeding and leaching of these frequencies that we can't see, feel, touch. We don't sense them, yet they are disruptors, another stressor. Okay, then we're outside of our bedroom now. It's a safe place where we spend hopefully 6 or 7 hours. Then we come into the house. So there we're looking at if you have wireless devices and you can wire things, like wire your computer, like hardwire stuff, that's preferred. If you have wireless networks, guess what? They have on-off buttons.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can turn them off when you're sleeping at night, not generating those signals. We're just talking about your house. What if you're in an apartment, or what if you've got a neighbor that has 5G wireless networks that can send a signal a half a mile down the road? We have to protect ourselves, not just from what's in our house, but also outside. But let's stay in our house for now. So we wire things when we can, we turn things off when we can, and you can buy inexpensively. I'm talking about $50 here and $100 there, devices that will remediate these various different electrical devices, so we can keep the level of these exogenous frequencies down.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now we're taking more inventory. We can get different kinds of water filters pretty inexpensively, reverse osmosis. There's some technology that's out there, again, inexpensive. We make a water filter inspired by Dr. Gerald Pollack. We can talk about that maybe some other time, but
Mm-hmm.
it's really about light and structured water more. It does filter, but there's other elements that we have special in ours. But water, let's filter our water. Let's filter our air. Let's keep the temperature in the house cool at night. That's better for our brains. Our brains, between the hours of 12 and 4 in the morning, the lymphatic system becomes active, and the brain actually shrinks a little bit and is flushed with spinal fluid. So it's kind of like a car wash.
Mm-hmm.
So we go through detoxing. And when we can get into a deep sleep or REM sleep, then we're able to actually produce growth hormones and most of the repair mechanisms that the body needs. So we basically beat ourselves up all day long. And then at night, we go through repair. And if you don't get into that deep restorative sleep, you don't get the repair.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have a chronic ailment, that favors the chronic ailment because your body doesn't have the vital force you need in order for you to fight back.
What about bringing nature inside? Like Himalayan salt lamps, gemstones, crystals.
Love that. We incorporate that in our technology because of that reason. But it more addresses the other part, which is it's not in our building communities right now. And by the way, there's a whole para committee or business or industry that's growing that's called the building biologists. So you can actually hire somebody to come in and do what I am talking about. But just listen to this podcast. Just kind of, take inventory of all these little elements. You want to keep the humidity around 45% because it'll keep the mold, the ability of your house or your area that collects mold down dramatically. So these are kind of the big ones, and then now again, you're out, maybe your work brings you outside the house for whatever reason. And once you step outside of your safe house, now you're exposed to all those elements, which you can avoid or be more conscious of and maybe help create a little healthier workplace if you do that. Or maybe it's just that you have to live with all that, but then you come back to your survival place, your healthy home, and that recharges your batteries and gets you back on track. So you have a fighting chance to get through what I consider a pretty tumultuous environment of the world that we're living in these days.
Yeah. So if somebody's listening right now who is now becoming aware of all these things, from EMF to environmental toxins and, tap water and air, all these things, What would your number one recommendation be? And of course, this is a generalization, but most important thing you recommend somebody start with, either a hack to incorporate, a habit, something to add.
Well, this isn't a sales pitch. And frankly, we make a really great technology and there's other people out there. So I just want to cue people in that one of the things that I think is super important is for us to consider eating foods that help us detoxify and or incorporating detoxification in our daily routine. So oftentimes we make an infrared portable sauna. It's affordable. I think it's one of the best available in that category. But I'm often asked in interviews and also even in our own coaching, how often should I use the sauna? And I just rhetorically say, well, how often do you get toxic? Because as far as I'm concerned, I mean, unless you're on an island like Bali or something, or real rural, that you're somewhat in a bubble and protected from some of the things we've already talked about, we're getting toxic every day. And so I believe you need to do something in your normal life pattern. I'm talking about a small lifestyle adjustment that will remediate the toxins that your lifestyle, your choices, your environment have brought to your body every day, and then hopefully start pecking away at the toxins that your body has stored over the years. We've got in bio research, we've got a direct correlation between toxicity and inflammation. And most of the reasons why people express themselves with any kind of symptom is because of inflammation. Mm-hmm. So lower toxicity, lower inflammation. Oh my God. Now you're back to a fighting chance. If you've got chronic ailment, I've given you most of your life back. We haven't even addressed the root cause of why you might have that chronic ailment, but just not being in bed and not waking up tired and just, having more focus and being more interactive, following your bliss, the reason why we have purpose. Mm-hmm. I think that's kind of, again, primal and fundamentals of what we're all about.
Okay. So you mentioned you guys have portable infrared saunas,
right?
Correct. Okay. And in the keynote that you were giving, you mentioned habit stacking, and that's something that I'm big on because very common excuse is I don't have time, right? So if you're going to be in the sauna for 30 minutes, you might as well stack that with other beneficial habits, which again, I'm a big fan of. So what are some of those stacks that you can incorporate while you're already spending the time in the sauna?
Cool question. About maybe 6 years ago, I started to sort of analyze our client base. And I said, Taylor, I got you in my sauna for 30 minutes just for general maintenance, detox, feeling good. What other kinds of hacks can I bring? So what other synergistic interventions, health interventions, can I bring into that environment to really 10x that whole wellness journey? I'm not even addressing why you might be in sauna. I'm just talking about holistically. And so I started to look at the physiological dynamic. When you're in sauna, you sweat. Sweating is one of your best detox pathways. And so infrared as a technology, what it does is it decouples the covalent bond between the toxicant and where it's stored in the body. That's either in fat or muscle or tissue, And so now it's actually mobilized. It comes into your bloodstream, and using a binder that's a stack, which could be activated charcoal, bentonite clay. It could be what Clayton Thomas talked about earlier, which is a silica derivative called zeolite. These are different binders that will actually act like biosponges. You mobilize the toxin, the binder grabs it, it takes the burden off your filtering organs, it helps your body eliminate. So it's not enough just to mobilize, you got to get it out, right?
I just want to mention spirulina and chlorella are
that's
two
also,
other popular ones.
I love that, and blue-green algae. Mm. The only thing with superfoods, I love superfoods, but you have to be a little bit careful where they come from because the waters are now being polluted. So the organisms aren't quite carrying what they can.
Yeah.
So be careful there. What is it? Okay, so the superfoods are really good, and binders are good as a stack. Now that's just for the detox component. The other things, when you're in sauna, and our particular sauna is full spectrum, which means we have near, mid, and far, and we deliver that in the same proportion that the sun delivers it to the planet. So that I'm trying to recreate that energetic expression in your home when we don't have time to go out. And I do it in a more concentrated way so that what I'm doing in a half hour in my sauna would be the equivalent of being in the sun at the right time of day for 3 to 5 hours, depending on your body. So that fits our lifestyles, right? So now you're in our infrared sauna, you're getting these frequencies, and each of those frequencies do different things. And the near frequencies will actually stimulate your mitochondria, give you cell energy, and it also will produce what's called nitric oxide, which is one of the 3 transient gases that will not only vasodilate, improve circulation, but it also triggers your blood to grab more oxygen when you make it available. So let's make it available. And so what we did was that we developed a ozone device that is a breathable form of ozone. So people that are listening, if you just Google, FDA says, "Warning, Will Robinson, don't use ozone unless you're in a doctor's care." Well, they're probably right when you're talking about high gamma ozone. And the way you know that, just again, back to Primal Healing, if you smell it and you cough, it's not good for you, okay? So we have a breathable form. It's kind of a unique approach. And so you place that in the sauna, you're sweating now, your skin, your largest organ, is actually a revolving door. Will mobilize toxins, will bind them up, you'll sweat them out, but then your skin becomes an accentuated breathing organ, so we can breathe things back in. So let's bring in some extra oxygen. And when you couple that stack with nitric oxide, now you've increased circulation, you've increased your blood's awareness to grab more oxygen, you're providing more oxygen. So one of the reasons why we age is because of oxidative stress. As we get older, our blood's ability to hold on to oxygen starts to diminish because we make less nitric oxide. So here we have reinvented that whole mechanism. Being in sauna, adding a little ozone device, you can help yourself just with that. And we have moved people that were, if you take an oximeter on your finger, we've moved people from 90% blood oxygenation to 99 in 5 minutes, just with this kind of mechanism we're talking about.
Wow.
So what else did we do? Big fan in the 80s. I was invited to Europe for political reasons and stuff like that, and to London. And I had an opportunity with my wife to visit some body shops before it became popular here. And I said to my wife, Melody, let's buy a field of chamomile. Let's buy a field of lavender and just, work on figuring out ways to extract these essential oils. I was so hooked on essential oils. And so I believe that most pharmaceutical, synthetic medicines, synthetic applications are mimicking nature, and all of those are made from extractions of plants and flowers. So why not go to the source, get a plant and a flower? An essential oil is basically reduced, especially the organic ones. And so what we did was I developed a really nice distribution or an atomizer, diffuser that uses not water, just the organic oil. And again, recruiting your skin to breathe these oils in. Now you're breathing medicine directly into your bloodstream. My God, avoiding all of that big pharma stuff. And not that pharmaceuticals have their place and hospital has their place, but it isn't necessarily my number one choice. I would rather use earth elements. I'd rather think about primal living, consider that. And I'd rather use what God gave us, our resources, our bodily energies to do the heavy lifting. I think that is more natural and can avoid a lot of those health trends that we're seeing now.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to drive this point home, your skin is your body's largest organ. So be mindful of what you are rubbing on your skin, putting on your skin, because everything does get absorbed, especially if you're in the sauna. That just, So
wait, a couple more.
Yeah.
We have guided meditation, so you can actually get into your soul searching. And about a year ago, I introduced a reflexology module in the sauna. So you can rub your feet on this module and it opens up all of your reflexology points. So that's TCM, that's Chinese medicine. We can actually augment and stimulate all of these energy meridians in your body, all while you're in the sauna in 30 minutes. Isn't that crazy? Crazy amazing, right? Easy for all of you to do. And it doesn't cost a lot of money. Hooray. And you can take charge of your life, and you can learn to shift this into a lifestyle event that not only you will benefit and your loved ones, but you can pass this information on to your kids. and then they'll grow up in a house where they realize that this is just second nature to take sauna and incorporate all these things, and then they'll teach their kids. And that's what I think, this kind of information format, and I think this is the lesson we all need to learn. I love talking to you, and storytelling is a dying art. And it's so important for us to keep this information alive and let everybody know that you can do this. It's attainable. And we're just, sort of pioneers in our own little area, but we're so happy and blessed that we're connected to Source. I'm really just the vessel, Taylor, honestly. It flows through me and my inventions, and the successes is really the stories that our clients tell us about how they've regained their health.
So, 3 more questions. One, let's talk about why Therasage products are less expensive than a lot of the other brands out there, where we're talking about the people over profit.
Yeah, I think that reflects to that philosophy, but that's just our philosophical input. But we also went through this life experience with our daughter. And when we had bills some months of 30 to 40,000 between medical bills and travel bills and medications and, all that stuff, you kind of get really, that's our roots. And we are very sensitive. And plus the stats, I mean, most of America is bankrupt because their insurance companies didn't cover their medical bills. And so people have just sold their houses and sold their souls so that they could keep themselves or their kids alive. Why can't we do that ourselves?
Yeah.
I mean, it's all part of a dark side of the world that we live in these days. And we're showing you guys a different way, bring you into the light. And so we keep our prices. Yes, we make a small profit, but that's mostly funds our research and the giving us the ability to bring more products to the marketplace.
And again, there are all free ways, right? Sunlight is free. Grounding is free. Clean water, if you find a spring, is free. If you want to hack it with our busy schedules, this becomes the next best option, right?
Exactly. Right. And we actually, our company, when you buy one of our products, and even if you don't, you can call up, make an appointment, and talk to Thera Health, which is our healthcare division. And there we have an expert chef, world-renowned chef. We have a world-renowned woman, Jacqueline, that's an expert on movement. We have an emotional healer. We have integrated functional health practitioners. So we kind of treat the whole body. And we're really happy about that program because it offers that advice and also a platform for free advice. If you need a little bit more attention, you can actually pay for some of the services to take a deeper dive, depending on what your needs. But it's nowhere nearly what people are experiencing out there when they hook up into the systems and get what I call mediocre healthcare or advice. We have nothing to gain by this except to help people. And that's what our goal is.
You guys are in the business of actually helping people.
Yeah, imagine that.
Yeah, imagine that. Imagine that. All right. Last 2 questions. What are you most excited about in the Therasage space?
Oh, my goodness. Now we're talking Schindler's List because all my inventions are my kids and I don't differentiate. I love them all.
Okay. Makes sense.
But we have 2 platforms. We have the sauna, which is a whole body experience, like a floodlight. You're surrounding and bathing in these frequencies. And we have an on-body experience, which we call healing pads. And there they work kind of together. Sauna might be 30 minutes. The on-body could be hours at a time. And they're very intuitive devices. So even though they're class 2 medical devices listed with FDA, so some of our language is somewhat egregious in our user guides because the FDA guides us that says you got to say this and you got to put these warnings. But honestly, we're harnessing sunlight, which is a natural form for rejuvenation and vitality. And so I love, and I'm constantly raising the bar on the current applications that we have. But I'm also generally we bring 3 new products to the market every year. And this year we're bringing 6 new products, which is why I'm so crazily, I'm in my obsessive phase where I'm very, very particular to make sure that it meets my specifications. And then we do all the testing. We also send our stuff out to third-party testers. So we don't drink our own Kool-Aid and get somehow distracted. So that we're really on track. We've created our own in-house heart rate variability diagnostic program, so we can actually test in-house the viability and then alter our product development so that we hit the target, the bullseye every time.
Wow. Is one of the new products the UV vitamin D? Are we allowed to talk about that?
Well, not yet.
This podcast won't be out for at least a month.
Okay, by that time it'll be on the market. So you guys are hearing it first, believe it or not. And that's another reason why you tune into this guy, because he's on target. We're calling it the Therasage Light. It's actually the next generation of the Tri-Light system, which I engineered a LED bulb, actual diode that most LEDs are actually, all of them before us are monochromatic. That means one diode per frequency, or one frequency per diode. I looked at it and I said, well, why is that? And there was no physics reason why. It was just an industry norm. So we created a light bulb, or a diode, that has 3 wavelengths in it. That's the Tri-Light. Wow. So I can actually generate 3 times the amount of biophoton modulation. So bio, body, photon, light, modulation. We can send different frequencies through one diode. And our emissivity, which measures the amount of your cell absorption of these wavelengths, is 98%. So you're getting this right into your cells, which is really like the closest thing to being out there and getting it direct from the sun or from nature. Wow. So now the Therasage Light is adding 2 more wavelengths, and one of them is UV. And the one we picked in particular will enhance. We can't really say that it produces vitamin D, even though I'd like to. So what I can say is, if you take a vitamin D supplement, which I recommend that everybody does because most of us are D deficient, if you use this light, or the Therasage Light, along with your supplementation, you will enhance the potentiating of your supplementation and actually get you to the levels that are going to make a big difference in your physiology. So stay tuned for that. And what's unique about this pad is I not only introduce the vitamin D or the UV frequencies, but I also have the manual option to pulse them at 2 different wavelength frequencies. I pulse at the heart frequency, and I also pulse at the earth frequency. Human rhythm. So, right. Yep. So now I am resetting your circadian rhythm and generating this light energy into your body at the same time. Beautiful. Pretty cool stuff. I love it. I'm excited for that. Definitely. Especially in the winter months. Last question. What does thriving mean to you? I'm actually going to shift that question, and it's something that I worked with my daughter. She was chronically ill with Lyme disease, and sometimes she was debilitated. Her fighting weight is around 120 pounds, and she got down to 86 pounds. So you can imagine, like, she was breathing fast, and I thought that was going to be, her demise at one point. We started using a lot of our techniques, and we pulled her back. We revived her. We got her an apartment by the beach. She walked every day on the sand. She got sunlight. She got the energies from the sun. She got the negative ions from the earth. She got the salts and the minerals in the spray from the Atlantic Ocean. I mean, all that's nature. Guess how much that cost? $0. Okay, guys, we can do this. So I said to her, you know what? 8 out of 10 diagnoses in the medical industry, the Western model, are wrong, mostly because the doctors aren't asking the right questions. And they jump to conclusions. Once you get that diagnosis, that follows you on your patient chart from doctor to doctor. Most of the doctors are, I can't say this about all of them, but many of the doctors are just kind of lazy. And so they, rather than doing their own testing and come up with their own diagnosis, they just use the one that was handed to them, which probably was wrong from the start. So take Lyme disease. Lyme mimics many other diseases, many neurological challenges like MS. So imagine you had the symptoms of MS, you really had Lyme. You saw a doctor who was not Lyme literate, wasn't looking for Lyme, so he wasn't even on the radar. He treats you for MS that you don't have. So he's treating you for what you don't have, and he's not treating you for what you do have. That's the worst combination that I can think of. So I said to Julia, you may always have Lyme disease, but what is the definition of health anyway? Is it about the diagnosis and the label? And so I said, let's redefine vitality. Let's redefine, what was your word? Thriving. Let's redefine what health really means. And to me, it's living symptom-free and basically following your bliss, having the ability and the energy to follow your bliss or your purpose. That could be your religion or your hobbies or your family or your community, whatever that is. We all find it. It's all individual, like everything else. But I think that not feeling good prevents us from doing that, right? Whether that's misdiagnosed or poorly treated or not knowing what's available for you. To me, I think that the true definition of healthcare is not to pay attention to the diagnosis. That's an excuse. It's really just to get centered on living symptom free. And if we can do that more than we live with symptoms, and as I said earlier, if we can lower toxicity, we lower inflammation, and we lower inflammation, and we lower symptoms. Now we're in the game. She may always have Lyme. Big deal. If you get bit by a mosquito, you may always have hepatitis, but you never have an episode. Then who cares what you have? That's just a label. Same thing for some of the other ones, hepatitis, and it's a big one.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's what I think.
Well, Robby, my purpose is to make thriving standard, and this episode absolutely helps me fulfill that purpose. So I appreciate you coming on.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Pleasure meeting you. This was way fun.
Awesome.
And I love your journey, and I love your community, and I just want to do everything I can to get connected and help you guys along. And let's make this the beginning of episode 1. Stay tuned for part 2 and 3. And thank you for having me.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Captain's Lifestyle Podcast. If you enjoy this information and want to maximize your health, happiness, and productivity, and would like support along the way, then click the link in the show notes and join the Captain's Lifestyle crew. This is my private men's community where we communicate daily. We meet once a week, hop on a coaching and accountability call, and host monthly high-performance masterminds. This is the maximum amount of value that I could possibly provide. And guess what? It's only $1. You have $1. It's the best dollar you'll ever spend. I promise you that. So click the link, join the crew, and welcome aboard.